When you think about games that shape what the RPG genre is today, it's always the same group: Earthbound, Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, and so on. Of course, there's no doubt that they had a massive effect on the kinds of RPGs we see today, but for the longest time, there was one game barely known outside of Japan that changed the formula more than any game in the genre would for years. And 23 years after its original release, that very game just got localized. Hello everyone, this is the RPG Monger, and today I want to tell you all about Moon Remix RPG Adventure, a game that after beating it has become one of my all-time favorites. So what even is Moon? If you're anything like I was a couple days ago, you've never heard of the game, and if you have, it was probably in passing. Well, to put it simply, Moon was the first anti-RPG ever made, each of the game's core mechanics going against the norm of the genre. Granted, in more recent times, that's not an uncommon trait, there being no shortage of games that parody the core aspects of RPGs in some way. The difference is, Moon originally released in 1997, smack dab in the golden age of sorts for classic RPGs. To say it was ahead of its time would be an understatement, though on that note, what would these mechanics be that made it an anti-RPG? Well, to start off, the game revolves around the simple question of why do RPG characters act the way they do? It all makes sense when you play the games, but looking in from an outside perspective, why would NPCs be okay with the hero rummaging through their belongings? I'm sure all those pots were pretty expensive. And why is it that it's okay for the hero to indiscriminately murder every creature in their path without second thought? Up until 1997, those things had just been the accepted norm when it came to RPGs, but when Moon came along, it chose to go against the flow. Instead of being the hero murdering countless monsters, in Moon, you see it from an outside perspective, watching the hero go on a rampage and seeing the path of destruction he leaves behind. Since rather than the game having turn-based battles like the rest at the time, Moon has no battles at all, the main goal of the game being the collection of love, whether it be by aiding NPCs or reviving all the slain creatures by capturing their souls. However, unlike many others where NPC-related quests all come down to simple fetch quests, Moon is far more intricate about it with the time system. Surprising me, as I didn't expect a game this old to have one, Moon features both a day and night system and a week system, where on each different day and certain time, characters will be going about their lives, doing specific things on certain days and times. It's a world that really feels lived in, and it's a blast going around town learning about how each character lives their lives in order to figure out how you can help them. Think Majora's Mask, though rather than the goal of the game being to stop the moon from crashing into the Earth, Moon's end goal is to go to the moon. The problem is, when you start out, you can't do everything you want, as there's a time limit to how long you can stay awake, the only way to get a game over in Moon being that time limit running out. Thankfully, it's not absolute, as you can extend it by eating food, but the main way you extend it is through gathering love through the aforementioned methods. Then, once you've done that, going to sleep is the only way your love level increases, sleep also being the only way to save your game. Like most great games, it's pretty easy to get a grasp on, though the further in you get, the more the game challenges your skills, introducing characters whose spirits are harder to catch, and bringing in NPCs whose love is a bit more elaborate to obtain. Not to mention, the game makes an effort not to be too overly overt with hints on how to get love, requiring you to do some digging of your own, whether that be talking to every character and following them around, or presenting them with different items. Seeing that, it's pretty clear that the game involves a lot of walking around and waiting for a character to do something at a certain time, and normally that would shy me away from playing a game. Except in the case of Moon, to avoid boredom, they added one key feature, the Moon Disc system. A genius addition in my opinion, whereas in most RPGs the game has a set soundtrack that is sometimes reused ad nauseum in certain areas. For the majority of Moon, you can actually choose what songs are playing. Granted, you don't start the game with any of them, but after playing for a little bit, you get access to a shop where you can buy most of them. And that's not all. While selecting your own music is already a great idea, each of the 36 Moon Discs are all composed by over 30 individual bands and music artists, resulting in probably the most diverse soundtrack I've ever seen in a game. You want to walk around a high-tech city while listening to industrial music? Easy. You want to watch birds fly by while listening to jazz? Sure thing. With how diverse all the music is, I'm confident even the most picky listeners will find something they like. Take me for for example. As I enjoy a good variety of music genres, I had a blast with the Moon Disc system, it making the overall experience a very chill one, all the portions where I had to wait going by in a flash as I listened to all the music. And if for some reason you're not in the mood for music, that's not a problem, the game having a good amount of ambient noise as well. Plus, on the visual side of things, Moon is pretty artistic too, the game's art style being very unique and even incorporating claymation sometimes. It's a game that covers pretty much all the bases it can, leading to a wonderful experience. Though before I talk about the story of the game and get into spoilers, let's look at the people behind Moon, as this game had one of the most unique dev teams out there. Founded in 1995, the company that created Moon was called Love Delic, and its background was pretty interesting. For starters, many of Love Delic's members had originally worked at Squaresoft, the premier producer for solid RPG games at the time. In terms of the games they'd worked on, the company's members had worked on all sorts of stuff, ranging from the development of Chrono Trigger to one member even being the character and monster designer for Super Mario RPG. Needless to say, they were a pretty talented bunch, who after working in the industry for a few years, saw firsthand how deeply ingrained the RPG formula was in the genre's titles. In turn, after breaking off and becoming their own indie development studio, the small dev team would immediately start making Moon, each team member working on a specific thing, but not restricted to it necessarily, most devs helping out with other aspects of the game too. It was the perfect environment to make something new and fresh, not bound by what the industry expected out of the larger companies. So that being said, I have to talk about the game's story, as I can't hold back any longer. Fair warning, I will get into some major spoilers, so if everything I've said about the game so far interests you, go play it. I'll say right now, it's one of those games that are much better played when you know next to nothing about the plot going in. I'll put up the timestamp on screen for when the spoilers are over. However, if spoilers don't bother you, or you've already played Moon, let's get on to the story. From the very beginning of the game, Moon dives right into the parody aspect of things, you literally playing as a boy playing the new hit game station RPG, Moon. And man, let me tell you, the humor of this game does not disappoint. The boy straight up skipping through the convoluted plot of the game as the text grows exponentially. It doesn't stop there either, as once the boy starts playing the game, Moon continues poking fun at the RPGs of the time. One of my favorites being the basic reused sprites paired with vastly different character portraits that don't match at all. Plus, if you try leaving the town immediately, the dialogue box reminding you to loot the houses is pretty hilarious. So then, after departing on your holy quest and reaching the evil dragon through the means of an airship, of course, the fight immediately starts, the hero dealing maximum damage to the dragon only to be interrupted by the boy's mother, telling him to turn off the game and go to bed. Tired from playing, the boy turns off the TV and walks away, only for Moon to turn itself back on and suck the boy right into the TV, transporting him to the land of Love to Guard, a world that's eerily similar to the game he was just playing, as just like the game, recently a terrible dragon has eaten all the moonlight, plunging the kingdom into turmoil. The main difference being, whereas from the hero's perspective in the game version, all the townspeople praised his efforts, in Real Moon, pretty much everyone holds some disdain for the hero, what with him mindlessly walking around, not interacting with anyone, and even chasing a dog around the town trying to kill it. Something that's awfully similar to what happened in Fake Moon, though we'll talk about that in a bit. After leaving town, you come across a solitary house where a lonely old woman lives. Even though up until now you've been invisible to everyone, the old woman mistakes you for her dead grandchild due to her poor eyesight and lets you sleep there for the night, giving you her grandchild's favorite clothes after you wake up. From here on, the story pretty much progresses how you want it to, each character becoming more developed the more you interact with them and receive their love. Take my personal favorite, the baker literally named Baker. At first, he seems like a normal guy, humbly selling bread from his bakery, but not all is as it seems, since once you learn he goes to the bar on Echo Days, in his drunken stupor, he doesn't lock the door to his house after stumbling back to it from the bar. In turn, once you go inside and up the stairs that are usually blocked off, you're met with the somewhat horrifying revelation that the bread Baker sells is actually, well, himself from a previous day. A pretty disturbing revelation, only made worse by the fact that I'd eaten bread from there earlier in the game. Though don't worry, it's not all traumatizing secrets with these NPCs. Take Fred, one of the guards at the king's castle. If you talk to him enough, you'll learn that he's always waiting for the other guard, Bilby, to go out at night. So if you wait outside his room on nights Bilby is at the bar and follow him to the throne room, you'll be greeted by a spectacular performance, Fred definitely living up to his name. And speaking of Bilby, his story is a whole can of worms as well, it being revealed over time that he's actually a divorced father drinking away his sorrows many nights out of the week, and aiming to get his paper airplane to fly as long as possible, as he'd promised his child he would do so. However, that's enough on the townspeople for now. Moving on, let's talk about the areas beyond Granby's house. Except when you try to explore, the hero strikes down his first victim, just like in Fake Moon, killing a helpless slime. In turn, after witnessing another murder and learning how to catch souls, the meaning of Moon slowly starts to rear its head. As you walk through vibrant fields dotted with the corpses of animals, it becomes clear that you're reliving your previous playthrough of Fake Moon, atoning for your actions since you'd played as the hero. Pretty heavy stuff, right? Well, trust me, that isn't the half of it. Moving past the initial areas, after reviving such creatures as 2 eggplants with legs and a dog that only appears at night to smell the markings of Tao, Granby's dog, you acquire your own house to live in. And from here on, the game becomes even more non-linear, opening up 3 new areas to explore, each with their own characters and slew of corpses to revive. Going in order, the top path leads to a few new areas, from a mushroom-filled cave to a haunted house. And in order to get rid of the corpse blocking the way to them, you have to go talk to an interesting individual named Adder, who after dealing out some memory games that caught me way off guard, ends up proclaiming himself to be God after seeing the revived creature be taken away. Then in the middle path, it leads to a desert, cliffside, and restaurant at the end, an aspiring idol working there that we'll come back to later. And on a side note, while I managed to get most of the spirits in the game without too much frustration, this little pot was the bane of my existence, as you have to have lightning fast reflexes to catch it when it randomly zooms past the area. Last on the bottom though is the tropical forest area, branching off to a few smaller locations like a fishing pond, 2 culturally opposite houses, and a high-tech laboratory, which in turn leads to an advanced city. Of note, an area I found particularly funny was the 2 houses, one being American themed and the other being Japanese themed. In the Japanese house, there's an old man who hates American culture, all the while accidentally incorporating it into his speech due to living by them for so long. And in the American house, there's a father, mother, and daughter, all hilariously depicted with 3D graphics as opposed to the rest of the game. In the household, the father is an accomplished comic book creator, having made such hits as Platinum Surfer and Z-Men. The problem is, he has a bad case of writer's block, beginning to take inspiration from Japanese manga as seen in his sketches, the complete opposite of the Japanese man living next door. But hold on, if we follow the hero's quest from Fake Moon, next up should be the house he visited, right? And when you look at that, the American house kinda fits the bill, doesn't it? Well, after visiting the house for the first time, when you come back a few days later, it's the daughter's birthday. The present you'd seen being sewn earlier just being a massive plush doll of the family pet Paragon. Except, uh-oh, just like in Fake Moon, the hero approaches the house, seeing the family pet and interpreting it as an enemy, when in reality, it's just a harmless animal. So then, to stop the hero from killing Paragon, the protagonist has to recreate the scene from Fake Moon, wearing the plush doll and catching it on fire to fool the hero into attacking the doll rather than the real Paragon. Thankfully, as it played out in the game, the hero walks away triumphantly, thinking he killed the real Paragon, and in response, having witnessed the scene in full, the father has a stroke of inspiration for a new comic, misinterpreting it as the Paragon being evil and the hero being in the right, much like how Fake Moon misinterprets the true nature of the hero's journey. Anyways though, moving on to the next part of the game, after tripping on mushrooms to revive a massive fish, don't question it, the protagonist reaches a haunted house, releasing a genius scientist named Dr. Hager from its basement, in doing so unlocking a way to finally reach the moon and bring back the moonlight everyone in Love to Guard so desperately needs. However, to do that, you'll have to help Hager finish the rocket, mainly the 5 essential components he needs. And if you've been going through all the areas and gathering love, it shouldn't be that much of an issue, since I myself already had 3 parts of the rocket on hand by that point. My personal favorite being straight up alcohol from when you drink with monkeys on a remote island after playing music with them. Again, don't question it. Though I will say, while the memory game from before with Adder was a bit challenging, the other memory game you have to play later on in order to get a part of the rocket is absolutely brutal, requiring me to somehow quadruple my focus to beat it, as as if you screw up once, you've gotta start all over. By far the hardest point of the game, and a little infuriating after failing so many times. But honestly, it may just be a me thing. I'm sure all of you could probably ace it first try. So then, with each part assembled, the rocket is now complete, able to take you to the moon whenever you're ready. Except hold on, there's still more love to gather, as you need to be a pretty high rank to go to the moon. And while I can't go through all of them, before I talk about the moon segment of Moon, there's a few notable side bits I can't neglect. For one, there's that idol I mentioned earlier. Originally you met her at that restaurant, but due to the hero making a mess of the place since he hit a dead end in his quest to go to the moon, she quit her job there, funnily enough promoting herself directly outside and giving you her breakout single once you help her out. And a little fun fact about that song, when they were putting together Moon's soundtrack, the vocals on that one were done by a random 12-year-old American girl the devs just happened to come across while she was vacationing in Japan. Something that couldn't be more emblematic of the game itself. Though speaking of the hero, what with us approaching the finale of Moon now, what's his deal? Is there anything more to him other than a mindless killing machine? Well, as it turns out, there is, and it's pretty well hidden in the game. Earlier on, if you're thorough with your snooping, you'll find a document mentioning a white arrow ritual in the bedroom of the kingdom's minister. When I first saw it, I brushed it off as meaningless lore, but there's far more to it than meets the eye. Since if you follow Tao at night, you'll find his secret hideout, that same white arrow mentioned in the document being buried in a hole Tao dug. Now things are getting more interesting, since for nearly all the game, the white arrow is essentially just a useless item, most people not responding to it other than remarking that it gives them a bad feeling. Though there is an exception. If you show the white arrow to the minister, at first he's shocked you even have it, but then tries to play it off like he knows nothing. Even more suspicious. Well, combined with what's shown in one of the items you get in the game, if you show the white arrow to Bilby while he's drunk at the bar, what he says all but confirms the hero's true nature. You see, before the protagonist fell into love to Guard, the kingdom's minister refused to agree with the plans made by the laid-back king, believing the only solution to bring back the lost moonlight was to create his very own hero. In turn, to select who would serve as the hero, the minister would randomly shoot the white arrow into town, the arrow finding its mark and causing a tragedy in the village. Most of the townspeople believing the victim of the arrow had died. Now, taking in all we know, why would Tao be the one to have the arrow in the first place? It's because the child whose role you directly replaced was the chosen one to become the hero, Granby's supposedly dead grandson. It gets worse too, as the arrow is only half of the equation. Remember how you had the hero put on the legendary armor in Fake Moon? Something that normally would be just a simple action in RPGs holds a very different meaning in Moon, because revealed through Bilby's drunken ramblings, the armor's purpose is much more than just raising the hero's defense stat. It's actually cursed, replacing the wearer's memories, thoughts, and emotions with the single desire to destroy anything deemed an enemy. So learning that grim fact, as if your actions in Fake Moon weren't already messed up enough, this means that by making the hero don the armor, you've unknowingly snuffed out a life, placing meaning in each little action that you'd normally never think about in usual RPGs. Nothing like some good old-fashioned pain with my video games. However, now, there's no turning back. All that's left is to go to the moon. Apologies in advance if I ramble a bit during this segment, it's just that I haven't played a game with this great of a finale in a long time. Anyways, having gathered each spirit and collected as much love as you could muster, it's time for liftoff, the little segment where you fly through space being filled with suspense, some parts being near silent and other parts featuring some characters you met along the way. Though thinking back to Fake Moon, wouldn't the rocket technically qualify as an airship? Well, in the hero's mind it did, as he'd somehow snuck on board the rocket, nearly jeopardizing it all if not for some friends you'd made along the way helping you out. So then, after being appropriately welcomed, you've made it to the moon, my personal favorite setting in the entire game. I mean, just look at it. Everything made completely out of clay, it really feels like you've landed on an entirely different world. And it's really rewarding if you revive every creature, since now you can see them all. Plus, when you're walking around the moon, that little effect they made with the background moving in tandem with you is right up my my alley. Not to mention, the theme they gave this part fits perfectly. But moving on before I gush more, unlike what you'd expect, the moon is actually pretty small, only having 3 locations: your rocket, a castle, and a door that seemingly goes nowhere. Touching on the door first before we go into the rest of the story, there's not much to see here aside from a massive pile of rum-roms, the same ones you've collected throughout your journey. Except rather than these giving you tips or lore, each one depicts a different character in the game, defining how they're supposed to act. Whether or not this is the origin of all characters in the game, I honestly can't say, as this is one of the few parts I haven't fully grasped yet, but that's my current theory right now. Let me know in the comments if there's another meaning to it or not. So now, it's the moment we've all been waiting for, time to confront the supposedly evil dragon inside the moon castle. Though rather than being faced with an imposing dragon like in Fake Moon, the dragon's true nature is that of the moon's guardian, the beast merely being one of 2 heads on a pedestal, the other head being that of the Moon Queen, who'd come to the protagonist in his dreams throughout the game. Simply put, neither of them had anything to do with the moonlight going away. It'd actually just been locked behind that aforementioned door all along, and now that the protagonist made it, through the power of love, he can save the day by opening the door. However, if we remember how Fake Moon ended, things sound a bit too good to be true, and once the protagonist can't open the door despite gathering all the love he could, the hero busts out of the rocket, once again slaughtering all the creatures you'd spent hours reviving over the course of the game. In the very literal sense, your past actions have come back to haunt you, the dragon and queen realizing that this was all preordained in the rum-roms, including their inevitable demise. So after helplessly watching the hero kill everyone in front of you, the protagonist can't do anything but accept his fate, getting cut down by the hero himself and just barely seeing the hero fall apart into a pile of armor, his existence not serving any more meaning now that his goal is accomplished. Under normal logic, that'd sound like a bad ending, since with the ending being interrupted by your mother telling you to go to bed once again, you're presented with an option: continue or not. After playing so many RPGs, at least instinct-wise, continuing seems like the obvious answer. I mean, with that ending, you must have missed some vital part that unlocks the true ending. But when it comes to Moon, that's the exact philosophy it wants to go against. In fact, much like the Queen and Dragon told you, the only way is to open the door, in this case not returning to real Moon and instead leaving your actual room to go out into the world, taking everything you'd gained by playing the game with you as you go out and live your life, effectively opening the door back on Moon and releasing the moonlight, allowing the characters to be free once and for all. So as you watch the credits set to a remix of the Idol song I mentioned earlier, the credits close on a notice declaring that Moon has been cancelled by its publishers. A pretty ironic note to end on considering the game would not sell very well. Truly, it's an ending that left me thinking about it for some time. It suggests that RPGs and games in general don't have to always conform to what a genre defines them as, which for 1997 is quite the message. All in all, it's no exaggeration to say that Moon is a masterpiece, plain and simple, and it'll be a game I'll think about for a long time. So alright, having covered the incredible story of the game, let's return to looking at it from an outside perspective. In the wake of Moon, how would Love Delic fare? Well, unfortunately, not great. After the lukewarm sales of Moon, the devs would go on to make 2 other games, of course only released in Japan, and both doing very poorly despite being pretty unique games in their own right. Due to that, after the 3rd game, Love Delic would disband, each of its core members going their separate ways and starting their own projects. And while some of their games would continue to not be localized, there's a pretty good chance you've played or at least heard of some of them. For example, there's Chibi Robo, Tulip, Little King's Story, the Tingle games, and Captain Rainbow to name some. And even though some of their games after Love Delic would continue not selling very well, in recent times things are looking better. For one, in the past couple of years, some of the key members of Love Delic have come together once again and created a new company, Onion Games. As of now, having made 3 new games, the localized Moon being their 4th. Though real quick, I just have to give a massive shout out to Tim Rogers who led the localization for this game. Seriously, if I'd not known otherwise, you could have told me this was just a port of a localization done in 1997 and I'd have believed you. In fact, interestingly enough, originally Moon almost did get localized, the English localization being cancelled by its producers probably due to the poor sales. Anyways, moving on to the legacy of Moon, it'd be an understatement to say the game wouldn't influence the future of RPGs RPGs as a whole. I mean, just take the most obvious example, Undertale. Taking major inspiration from Moon, Undertale is proof that Moon succeeded in its goal. Whereas in 1997, Moon was painfully ahead of its time, now, games like it have the potential to top the charts. In fact, while in Japan for interviews, Toby Fox had coffee with one of Moon's main creators, inspiring him to localize the game in the first place. A pretty crazy situation if you think about it. Talk about using your influence for good. My only hope is that with Moon being so accessible now, maybe it'll finally get the attention it deserves in the modern game market. Though that being said, it's time to finish things off. Without a doubt in my mind, Moon Remix RPG Adventure is one of the best games out there right now, and if you have a Switch and $20 to spare, give it a shot. I guarantee you, it'll be an experience to remember. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, do subscribe, and today's cool thing of the day is Mega Man Battle Network. Speaking of underrated games, I'm honestly shocked I've only come across this amazing series now. At the moment, I've only started the first game, but I'm definitely gonna be playing them all and probably making a video about them in the future. So stay tuned, still gotta finish Pokemon Conquest first. Anyways, here's the Twitch clip of the day. What? I thought she said weak to wind. So that being said, I'm the RPG Monger, and don't forget that each and every one of you are fantastic.